Look at Australia from space at night. Every other continent on Earth glows like a scattered constellation. Cities, towns, roads, a whole civilization lit up across the land. But Australia? Australia is a ring of fire hugging the coast. And then, nothing. An absolute, yawning void of darkness stretching across the entire interior. It looks less like a country and more like someone left the lights on around the edges and forgot to build anything in the middle. And here's the thing. That image isn't a trick of the camera. About 95% of Australia is virtually uninhabited, with most of its population clustered on the edges of the continent. We're talking about the sixth largest country on the planet, a landmass bigger than the contiguous United States, and almost all of it is empty. So what on earth, or rather, what in the earth, made this happen? Buckle up. This is the story of how geography basically told most of Australia. No humans allowed. But before we get into the brutal details, let's zoom out, because the numbers alone are almost insulting. Australia covers an enormous 7.7 million square kilometers, yet has one of the lowest population densities in the world, at roughly 3.4 to 3.5 persons per square kilometer. For comparison, India has a population density of over 480 people per square kilometer. And the kicker? Java, an island 60 times smaller than the Australian continent, has 6 times the population of Australia. So what is it about this ancient, sun-scorched land that makes it so spectacularly, almost aggressively, empty? The answer comes in 5 brutal geographic gut punches. Let's count them down. Number 5. The subtropical trap. Why the sky itself refuses to rain. Most people assume Australia is dry because it's hot. Wrong, it's hot because it's dry, and it's dry because of where it sits on the planet. Australia lies between the 10th and 40th southern latitudes, placing most of the country within a subtropical high-pressure zone, the so-called horse latitudes, a region of descending dry air that stops cloud development and rain production. Think of it like a giant atmospheric lid clamped over the continent, suffocating any chance of rainfall before it even gets started. Australia has a very low annual average rainfall of just 419 millimeters, and this dryness is governed mostly by the subtropical high-pressure belt, which drags dry air down from the upper atmosphere onto the continent. The result? According to Australia's Bureau of Meteorology, 80% of the land receives less than 600 millimeters of rainfall annually, and 50% gets even less than 300 millimeters. To put that in context, London gets about 600 millimeters a year, and London is famously, legendarily wet. Half of Australia gets half of that, and just when you think it can't get worse, it does. But we'll get to that. First, let's talk about the wall. Number 4. The Great Dividing Range. Australia's rain thief. Picture the eastern coast of Australia. The Pacific Ocean sits out there, warm and laden with moisture, sending fat, rain-heavy clouds rolling towards the land. Sounds promising, right? Except those clouds hit a problem. The Great Dividing Range, a mountain chain that runs over 500 kilometers down Australia's entire eastern spine, from tropical Queensland all the way to Victoria. The Great Dividing Range forces moist Pacific air upward along its eastern slopes through orographic lift, leading to enhanced precipitation. Annual rainfall on these eastern slopes can exceed 200 millimeters in elevated alpine regions. Gorgeous for the coast. Catastrophic for the interior, because once the air passes over the crest, it descends, warms, and dries out, creating a significantly drier climate on the western leeward slopes. Cold ocean currents off the west coast mean there is little evaporation to form rain clouds there either, while the Great Dividing Range running down Australia's east coast prevents rain from penetrating far inland. The continent is essentially double-blocked, attacked from both sides. The rain never makes it in, so the coast gets soaked, the interior gets nothing, and that leads us to the dead heart itself. Number 3. The Outback, where heat eats everything. Imagine standing in the center of Australia in January. The ground beneath your boots is red, not brown, not orange, but a deep, almost violent red. The sky above is cloudless and relentless. Summer daytime temperatures in the desert interior range from 32 to 50 degrees Celsius. 50 degrees Celsius, that's 122 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the temperature of a very enthusiastic oven. This arid zone occupies 70% of the Australian continent. 70%. And within that zone, the driest areas average just 150 millimeters of rainfall each year. But here's what makes it even more punishing than the raw numbers suggest. Compounding the issue of low rainfall is the high rate of evaporation. Australia's sunny climate and high temperatures mean that any moisture that does fall is quickly evaporated back into the atmosphere, leaving very little to infiltrate the soil. The average annual evaporation rate across much of the continent significantly exceeds the average annual rainfall, creating a perpetual water deficit. You could get a rainstorm out there, and the desert would swallow it whole before you finished watching. The land is that thirsty, that ancient, that hostile. And speaking of ancient, that's our next stop. Number 2, dead soils, the oldest land on Earth that can't grow anything. Here's something that surprises most people. You'd think a continent this vast, this ancient, would have rich, deep, fertile soils. Nope. Quite the opposite. Australia's interior soils are some of the most nutrient-depleted on the planet. And the reason is because the continent is so ancient. The geology of Australia spans a geological time period of over 3.8 billion years, including some of the oldest rocks on Earth. That sounds impressive, until you realize what billions of years of weathering without renewal actually does to soil. The majority of Australia's soils are derived from ancient, heavily leached substrates, formed when the climate across the whole continent was warmer and wetter. All those nutrients got washed out over millions of years, and unlike continents that get their soils refreshed by volcanic activity, glaciation, or tectonic uplift, this slow weathering has leached nearly all the nutrients out of the soils, which haven't been replenished by any geological activity bringing fresh minerals from deep within the Earth. Australia is the driest inhabited continent, with the least fertile soils. That's not a travel brochure. That's a geological verdict. Even if you could somehow get water into the interior, you'd be trying to grow food in dirt that's been nutritionally bankrupt for tens of millions of years. The plants that do survive out there have evolved extraordinary tricks just to scrape by, but large-scale human agriculture? Not a chance. And if bad soil and no rain weren't enough, let's talk about the rivers, or rather, the devastating lack of them. Number 1. No rivers, the final nail in the continent's coffin. Every great civilization in human history was built on a river. The Nile, the Ganges, the Yangtze, the Mississippi. Rivers are highways, irrigation systems, and drinking water sources all rolled into one. They are, quite literally, the arteries of civilization. And Australia's interior has almost none. The Murray-Darling Basin is Australia's major inland river system, encompassing the drainage basin of the Murray River, Australia's longest river, and the Darling River. The basin covers around 1/7 of the Australian landmass. 1/7, for the entire country's main river network. And even that one river system is a disappointment by global standards. The combined flow of all Australian rivers, including the Murray-Darling, is the equivalent of only about half that of China's Yangtze River alone. It gets more embarrassing. The Murray carries only a small fraction of the water of comparably sized rivers in other parts of the world, with great annual variability of its flow, and it has dried up completely during extreme droughts on 3 occasions since official record-keeping began. Australia's longest river, dried up completely 3 times in recorded history. Total water flow in the Murray-Darling Basin has averaged around 24 gigaliters per year. the lowest rate of the world's major river systems. The lowest on Earth. And everything west and north of that basin? Salt pans, gibber-stony deserts, red sand dunes, sandstone mesas, and rocky plains, mostly seasonally dry with rivers that often have no outflow, not navigable, not reliable, not livable. The pullback, a continent squeezed to its edges. So here's where we end up. Take all 5 of those forces, the subtropical pressure trap, the rain-stealing mountains, the furnace of the Outback, the dead ancient soils, and the near-total absence of reliable rivers, and you get a continent that has essentially vetoed human settlement across the vast majority of its surface. The result is one of the most dramatic human geography patterns on the planet. About 85% of Australia's population lives within 50 kilometres of the coastline, largely due to the more temperate climate and access to resources along the coast. All the large cities of Australia, with the exception of the planned capital Canberra, are located on the coast. Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide, every one of them clinging to the edge, with their backs to the ocean and the vast red nothing stretching out behind them. Although the desert covers about 3/4 of the continent, it supports only around 800 New Island residents, less than 5% of the Australian population. 3/4 of the land, 5% of the people. That satellite image of darkness makes complete geological sense now. And there's something almost poetic about it. A continent that has been sitting here for nearly 4 billion years, shaped by forces so ancient and so powerful that even modern civilization, with all its technology and infrastructure and sheer stubborn human will, has barely made a dent. The Outback doesn't care about your ambitions. It just sits there, red and silent and enormous, daring you to try. Australia is not empty because nobody wanted it. It's empty because the land itself, the soils, the sky, the rivers, the heat, conspired over billions of years to make sure that almost no one could have it. That is the most spectacular piece of geography on Earth, and now you know exactly why. If this blew your mind, smash that like button and subscribe, because we're just getting started on the world's most extraordinary geographic stories. Drop a comment below. Which part shocked you the most? The rivers, the soils, or the sheer scale of the emptiness? Let's talk about it.